Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond Recovery. My name is Matt, of course, the host of Beyond Recovery. And today I have another podcast host. His name is Simon Caruso, coming in from down under. He's down in Australia there. And he is the host of the Limitless Man podcast. Simon, thank you so much for getting up fairly early in the morning as of Australia time anyways. 3 p.m. here, 6:30 a.m. your time, and you're a day ahead of me. Simon, how are you today?
Good, man. Very well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Great to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was excited to have you on. I very much enjoyed we had a pre-conversation before your podcast, and then, the actual conversation on your podcast, which it was just great, man. It was you can just kind of tell when you have a good connection with somebody, and hopefully not putting words in your mouth. I felt that we had a good connection. So,
yeah.
I'm hopeful for this show. Hopeful is not the right word. I'm excited for this show. So.
Yeah. No, it was awesome. It was only a couple of weeks ago that we hooked up, and we had you on my podcast, and it was, it was an awesome conversation. And
definitely,
I love what you're doing. I love your movement, and I love the fact that you're getting lots of different people on your own podcast as well. So I think you're doing wonderful things, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I can reciprocate that very genuinely to you. I love the name of the podcast, The Limitless Man. Reading your bio before you came on here, there's some really great stuff that you're doing. Very bold and brave, self-belief type stuff that I think is really going to resonate with the people that are listening. Plus, you do have a background in, the drugs and alcohol and such, which of course is a big part of what the message of this show is. Before we do get into that, though, I want to start in the now, in the present time. Let's give a little bit background on the Limitless Man podcast. Like, when did you start it? What were the reasons for starting it? Just, a little bit of background on the show, please.
Yeah. So look, man, I started it. I actually did my first episode. It would have been towards the end of last year. And I've been thinking about it for many years to do something where I just want to understand how people overcome their own barriers and how they get from, where they were perhaps to where they are today. And so it started off sort of as a bit of an idea, but when I sort of started flirting with it, say 4 or 5 years ago, thinking about it, I lacked that self-belief that, I knew enough to be able to actually step into that and start. And obviously, you're never going to know enough to start anything. And so you learn that just through experience. But I was quite hesitant for a little while. And it all sort of started really because over the last 7 years, I've invested a lot in myself in the personal development space. So, I grew up really never knowing what I wanted to do with my life ever. So my parents moved to this country. They came from Italy, and over there they had nothing. So they're starting a brand new life here. And they were massive on education, education. It was all about making sure you did well at school, you go on and do something, perhaps some sort of degree, some sort of tertiary education once you finish school. And then obviously, Matt, you get a good job, you make good money, and then life should be pretty easy, shouldn't it? So,
of course. Yeah, it's the plan, right?
That was the plan, my friend. That was the plan. So what happened? I honestly, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And growing up in the culture that I grew up in, there's obviously a very strong family connection there. And there's a sense of, wanting to do the best thing by your family, by your parents. So effectively what happened was I ended up just doing what I thought was the right thing to do. And I wasted a couple of years. Well, I shouldn't say wasted because, looking back now, they're definitely, I invested them, like I learned a lot about myself over that time. And so I went to university just to enroll in a course called Computer and Information Science. It was a degree at the time, which I'm not even sure if they still do today, but I only enrolled in it because I figured that at the time there was this massive push and this massive movement of the internet and the information age. And so it was really happening, and I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And I just pretended to be attending, my seminars and my I can't remember what they're called now. The is it the tutors or the where you do your classes?
So tutors would be the ones that are helping you with the curriculum.
Nah, not tutors. It was tutorials, I think. Was it
tutorials. Sure. Yeah, I get you.
Yeah.
Like the classes or the lessons.
Because back then it was all face-to-face. There was no Zoom or anything like this. These days, I think you can just do it like this. So you had to physically actually go there and do it.
Right.
So anyway, I didn't rock up to anything. I was just I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And it got to the point where the university was actually going to kick me out. So they put me on what's called a contract. And the dean said, look, if you don't lift your game, you're out. And so I ended up leaving anyway before that happened. And, my parents were mortified. And so I got myself a job. I found myself a job in the telecommunications industry. So I started working in mobile phones at the time, which again was quite prominent. This would have been sort of in the early 2000s. So that's giving my age away now. So yeah, it's but it's something that it was pumping at the time. It was huge. It was a massive industry. And, and for a period I enjoyed it because, I had this goal in my mind where if I could work and make a reasonable living and I could pay off my bills, and ideally I had this one goal in my mind where I wanted to buy a property or buy a house and pay that house off, as in owe nothing on it, And I figured that if I could do that, then life would just fall into place and I'd be fine. And so interestingly, I did do that. I worked a couple of jobs for a period of time and, I was able to work my way up in different areas. And so that actually happened. So, and I would have been around 30 at the time. Now, it wasn't the way I thought it would be though, because once I got there, I felt, okay, what do I do now? And so I went on a bit of a journey for a few years. I was just thinking about what I wanted to do, and I never really took any action or anything like that. And it wasn't really until I had my first. So I've got 2 kids. I've got a daughter who'll be actually 8 this Sunday, and I've got a 3-year-old boy. It was only until I had my daughter that I really started to think about, okay, what am I doing here, and what am I going to do? Because I honestly felt lost. I was just unhappy. I mean, I was making 6 figures at the time, but with a few other benefits here and there, but I just felt empty. I felt like I wasn't serving my purpose. And I always felt that I was here to do something, special with my life, to do something a little bit different. So I'm really talking to people out there who, they know that within themselves. They can feel that little spark in them, and if you're one of these people listening and you can feel the spark, then, you're obligated to find what that spark is, to actually draw it out of yourself and then just start moving. Nothing's going to be perfect, but that's what I started doing. So I started attending, workshops, seminars, reading books. I mean, you can see behind me, I've got a bit of a collection behind me here. And so, and, this is from a guy who I fucking hated books. I hated reading books at school. I had no interest in reading some of the content that I was asked to read at school, but I found a lot of value and still do to this day. I make it a habit to read and just to study other people, to fill my mind with good information, and start eliminating things like, drama, the news. I love to understand what's going on. Don't get me wrong, but I think, way too many of us consume ourselves in it. And so it's not realistic. When I say it's not realistic, it's not there to give us a balanced view of what's actually happening. It's drama.
Yeah.
It's designed to put eyes on the television or these days, your tablet or your phones or whatever they are. So, and I think moving away from that and, getting myself in some really, really good proximity around certain people really helped me sort of extract my skill set and what I'm here to do. And that's, I guess, how this was born, really. I started to record podcasts. I've got a one-on-one, a dynamic program that I put together to extract people's own potential and then actualize that potential, just specific in a couple of areas of their life. And so, yeah, it's just sort of gone. It's gone from there. And it's been the last sort of 3 months where I've pretty much gotten the most growth. I've been the most consistent. And, I had a full-time job up until about 3 months ago. And now, obviously, this is what I do full-time, recording podcasts, speaking at events, and coaching people through a process. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, congratulations, man. Yeah, we're so sort of lockstep on the same path, very close as far as like timelines. Betting on ourselves and doing the full time, this the whole podcasting and coaching endeavor. So congratulations. How does it feel? You're 3 months in. Like, how is that? Because I remember, like, for me, I'm like maybe a couple months ahead of you, so I'm still in that same stage of, it's there's some ups, downs all around. There is some of that self-doubt. I've learned to, be able to turn that down, of course. Like, what has it been like for you these first 3 months of full time doing
Yeah.
what you love?
It's been different. So fortunate for me, I've got a couple of good coaches around me. So there's one coach in particular who, I would touch base with her once or twice a week. And, it's important that I have that accountability, but also that support at the same time too. So it's a balance between, giving me a kick up the ass and then, helping me out when I'm a little bit down. Because yeah, you're right, man. You do have those days of doubt, but it's exciting as well. So I think that sweet spot is that, you've got that little bit of nervousness or fear, but then that excitement at the same time as well. And I think if you've got a bit of both there, then I think you're onto something because, ultimately, there's nothing more gratifying and fulfilling than stepping into, the person that you want to become. And I think that's part of the process is to imagine that person and then just start to take baby steps each day, which is what I'm doing. And, I'm being held accountable in some of my actions as well. And, like you make mistakes, man. Like I've made many mistakes and I continue to just refine and tweak as I progress and as I go along. But the biggest challenge is obviously when you transition from employee to, full-time, business owner / entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it. You've got to really, maximize your action plan. You've got to have a series of tasks that you accomplish throughout the day that are relevant, and you're not just sort of playing out time, so to speak. When we're employees, we find a lot of the time we just sort of want to get through the day to get out of there and go home. And then we do the same the next day, especially if we're not enjoying what we're doing. And it's just not like that. It's all about, productivity, and it's about just moving closer to what that end goal is. So I'm loving it, man. Like I have days where I'm scared to death. And then I have other days where it's like, this is fucking awesome,
Yeah, right. Yeah, well put. Well put. I think it's like it's finding the edge. It's like that, expanding out of your comfort zone, or at least getting up into that, that area where you're a little fearful. You're not sure how things are going to turn out, and just kind of fluctuating in there, right? You don't want to get to the point that you're so paralyzed or afraid that you're going to start like making the wrong move, or you know what I mean. That can really get in your head and affect your performance. But just kind of fluctuating in that on that edge is is so important and so cool to hear. I want to hear about your program that you had. I talking about realizing the potential inside you, inside the client, and then actualizing to the point, the purpose of purposeful integration and such. But before you do that, you talk about baby steps, and I believe you and I talked about atomic habits, right? Did you bring that up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
brought
I'm
that
thinking,
up. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So this will lead into another question, but we'll start with that. So atomic habits, that's been a big one for me too. Just like the 1% a day, like even 10 minutes a day on certain tasks. So for me, I always do like a 10 minutes of reading and, 10 minutes of jogging, whatever. What are the types of things have you had that sort of mindset with, that accumulation over a long enough timeline? This is really going to start like, with this type of investing. Like, yeah, I'm just more interested in
Yeah.
the way you put together your day or your morning. Do you
Mm.
have routines, rituals? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. So generally, right, and it's funny because I've got like the habit tracker right up here, which you can't see on camera, but
Yeah.
there's certain non-negotiables or things that I'm trying to develop that I do every day. So normally I wake up and I do some sort of, gratitude exercise. And, it can only goes for a couple of minutes. I mean, you don't have to sit there. Never, anyone can do this differently, but I normally reflect on the previous day and I go, what am I most grateful for that happened to me yesterday? Or what's the best thing that happened to me yesterday? Then I normally write 3 things that I helped someone else do yesterday. And I really like this one because what it does is it programs, my mind. It reminds me to, always find opportunities to give something to someone or to help someone out or to have that extra conversation with someone that might make a difference. So it's always front of mind. And then I normally list 3 things, that I actually assisted for myself. Like, how did I actually improve myself throughout the day? So it's just those 3 things that I do every day. And that's how I normally start my day. Then I move my body and I do some sort of movement. So whether that's just it could be a walk, it could be, I do some weight training at the gym, but, generally that's what happens every day. And, with all these, if I miss a day, then generally, I won't miss 2 days in a row. So that's part of the whole mantra in the book as well. So if you miss
Yeah.
that one day, that's okay. But just, yeah, make sure it's not 2 days in a row. So it always starts with gratitude and some sort of movement. Then reading, that's non-negotiable. So,
Mm,
and again, it's just 10 pages, man, as a minimum. Now, some days it's
right.
20 or 30 pages that I'm
Sure.
reading,
Sure.
but some sort of reading. And what that does is, like I said, it fills your head with good information, and a good way to start reading. And this is what I've done is when you pick up your phone, because we do this, unconsciously, right? We pick up our phone and we're checking social media, we're checking Facebook and whatever else we're checking on our phone. Once you become conscious of that, put your phone in another room,
Mm,
like get rid of it, and just start with, like, one page or something. Get a book and just read one page, and then put the book down and forget about it,
mm,
and then do the same the next day, and then all of a sudden one page becomes 2 pages. And so it's about not so much making it difficult to do the habit. It's just making it as easy as possible by removing some of those distractions, which is what James Clear talks about in the book,
big time.
Atomic
Yeah.
Habits. So,
Yeah.
but generally that's what I do. I'm just having a look now. Then there's um the diet as well that I've got up there. So just tracking, a clean diet. There's a social media work that I'm doing at the moment. With my coach is holding me accountable with that. So there's certain things I have to do for social media.
Yeah.
Um, there's alcohol as well, which I'd love to get to as well. So
You're getting to that. You bet.
we'll get to that
Yeah.
because, there was a period of time where, I was consuming way too much alcohol, and so, that's one of my KPIs too now, where, these days I might have, a couple of glasses of wine on a Friday or a Saturday night, but, absolutely nothing during the week at all. So no alcohol at all during the week. So that's another KPI that I've got up there. And at the moment, that's pretty much all I've got at this stage. So they're my non-negotiables that I'm
Yeah.
working on. But yeah, it's just every day you accomplish it. You put a little cross
Yeah.
next to the actual next to the task, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's you look back, and if you miss a day or whatever, then you can always look back and go, look, it's not the end of the world because I've been able to sort of stack so many days together previously,
Yeah.
and so yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I had a good conversation with somebody else about this is in the subject of like, alcohol or drugs and
mm,
addictions as such. Specifically with relapses. So if somebody has a relapse, we use a kind of the comparison of like a sports team. Like if you had a if like a over here baseball team, if a baseball team wins like 30 games in a row and then they lose one, you're not gonna just
yeah,
dog pile on the team,
yeah,
and then you're gonna go, well, dude, you just had 30 wins in a row, right? So
yeah,
really focusing on that again, it's a mindset shift instead of feeling the need to just dog pile on yourself when you have a day that you didn't do or whatnot, right? So I
mm,
like that analogy, and I really like how you mentioned it, just non-negotiables, and it doesn't have to be this epic 2 hour workout or
no,
like read half
no,
a book. It can be a couple pages, right? And just
mm,
yeah, absolutely. So no, really cool. I remember, yeah, I just remember the conversation of Atomic Habits, and so wanted to get into that. What are some of the other books that you've, and might be challenging by the sounds of how many books you read, but what are the
yeah.
ones that just jump right into your mind about, oh
The
man, this
first
really
one,
changed it?
and it's the first one I ever read for anyone that wants to have any, sort of improvement, and that's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon
Ooh,
Hill. So
of
that's
course.
an old classic,
Yes.
but and I'm sure if your audience, guys, if you haven't heard of this book before, it was written by a guy called Napoleon Hill, and Napoleon Hill wrote the book in conjunction with a dude at the time, because this was written in the early 1900s, called Andrew Carnegie. His name was. Now, this Andrew Carnegie guy was a massive tycoon in the steel industry. And it took Napoleon Hill 25 years to actually write this book. Okay. So he interviewed or researched 500 of the most elite, business people / entrepreneurs at the time. And, 25 years of gathering information and data. And the steps in the book are based on that information pretty much that he got from these guys. And so I don't believe there's anything else like it. If I had to choose one book, obviously that is the one, because that's
Mm,
one that I go back to quite often. It's more like a textbook, as opposed to an actual novel. So, and the more sort of you grow and the more you develop, the more layers you get out of it. So you'll read something say a year ago, and then you read it 12 months later, and it'll mean something different to you because you view something differently to how you viewed it previously. So that's the cool part about it, is that you continue to sort of learn and grow. And as you're reading it, you just get different extractions and different ideas and concepts because of where you are, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I haven't. It's really great that you brought that up. I've had that one on my mind for a while. I think I had the Blinkist version, where it's just like the 7 minute, like just cold
Yeah.
as nose
Yeah.
version. And of course, I read it like, but it was years ago. So yeah, that's a great one to bring up. I want to get into, I want to get a bit into your story and just give you an opportunity. The floor is open just to get
Yeah.
into your, substance abuse issues that you
Mm,
had. The whole
yeah.
context, I imagine it went hand in hand with doing something that you didn't find overly fulfilling, something
Yeah.
that's incredibly relatable to myself, and I imagine will be to a lot of the listeners. What was your relationship just with drugs and alcohol, Simon,
Yeah.
and that kind of led you to this life you're leaving now?
Yeah. So look, I grew up in a typical environment, and in Australia, I mean, alcohol is it's just part of our culture here. You know, it's just what we do. Everyone drinks. You know, like
Yeah.
it's like if you don't drink, then you're not
Yeah.
normal. You know,
Right.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So really, it's part of our culture, and for the most part, I think I would say like it's what it is. It's widely accepted, and as a young kid, I grew up around barbecues, drinking. I probably started, I had a sip, of alcohol when I was maybe 14, 15 years of age. Didn't think much of it, not a big deal. And what happened was during high school, I remember it was my final year here. And I was, as a kid, I was quite overweight. I was obese, and I lost a lot of weight in my final year at school. So I lost, we've got kilos here, so 30 kilos, which equates to about 65 pounds, I think.
Yeah.
So if
Yep.
you're, yeah, well,
Yep.
thereabouts.
Yeah. Good
So,
call. Yep.
which is a lot.
That
Okay.
is. Yeah.
And I remember at the time I was underage, and I started sort of, because I lost the weight, I started getting a little bit more confident. And so I started going to these parties that I never would go to before, because I was starting to feel better about myself. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and that's when sort of it was just everywhere, and I started drinking at these parties, and I loved it. Like that first time, I still remember the first time I started drinking, and it was one of the biggest buzzes, and I'm like, wow, this is pretty good, this feels good. I felt like Superman, I felt even more confident. And so in the short term, it was like, wow, this is pretty cool. And that would have been when I was 17. And from the ages of, say, 17 to like 22, 23, I would say it was pretty consistent, like every weekend. And it wasn't just alcohol. Then, there was some other things that started to happen, like a bit of cocaine and, marijuana, ice as well. Even I remember, back in the day as well. So it was just because obviously you've experienced a high and you get used to that high, then okay, you're looking for something else. And so it seemed like fun at the time, but I mean, what happened was that as you sort of get older, you've got responsibilities, and if you want to do something with your life, it's not a sustainable way to go about it. So you can't just continually go out and get absolutely smashed and then pick yourself up. You got responsibilities, you've got a career, you want to progress. And so it just started to wear thin on me. I started to really think about what I was doing. And, for the most part, in my 20s, I was, on and off. I was comfortable with it. But really, it was sort of by the time I got into my 30s that I started to think, wow, I'm going to get my shit together here, because, I wanted to start a family. And, yeah, it just it wasn't serving me anymore. And so I actually reached out to, a friend of mine. He's a coach of mine. He's got a background in psychology, and he went through a similar path himself. And he sort of helped me, identify some of the areas where I was sort of falling over and what I needed to do. And really what I was doing was I was drinking, I was taking drugs occasionally because, I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. I had a great family life, don't get me wrong, but as far as my career and what I wanted to do in my professional life, I hadn't had any level of fulfillment, and I just felt so numb, you know, and I was working and I was just enjoying the weekend. And yeah, I was living for the weekend in a sense. And
Mm,
so it wasn't until I changed that really, or at least started to, open my eyes as to what I could potentially do with my life and what are some other things I could introduce to give myself those feelings of gratitude and fulfillment and feel good about myself, that I started to tone down the alcohol. And so, like I had this chat with you on your podcast. I still drink. Like I drink occasionally on weekends. I don't drink every weekend. But I find that because I've got so many other things I'm focused on now, the desire has gone. Like it's not something that I want to be doing. Most certainly most of the time, because there's just so many other things that I'm doing at the moment, and I've got a lot of other responsibilities and things that require me to, well, a lot of me, to step up
mhm,
and to be
mhm,
there. So
mhm.
yeah, for me, and that's why I found it interesting when we had a chat on the podcast. That some people I find, they have to give it. It's got to be all or nothing, pretty much. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all or nothing, and I can understand that because it's very easily it can escalate once you have one or two. Then it's just like fucking. It's an all in sort of,
Yeah.
and you just go for it, But for me, what I've been able to do, and touch wood, it's worked well, so far, is just have occasions where I might have a few, but yeah, it seems to be now these days. It's just not an issue like it used to be previously. So yeah,
Well, that's great. And there's going to be a few people that listen to this and just go, "Damn that guy!" Right?
yeah,
It's and that's. But for me, it's not like there is such a spectrum with people, and from some of the different coaches and other folks that I've had on here, we've had this discussion before. Just like so, if somebody reaches to the stage like myself where I was more or less physically dependent on it as well, right? It was
mm,
my catch-all. It was like my cure for anxiety, or so I thought. Right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
I was at the start stage where I needed it physically to continue on, right? I was very much fueled by it. Whereas
yeah,
I get the impression you weren't necessarily ever there. Yes, it reached a stage where it was affecting your performance in other aspects, but you're able to pull it into and redefine your relationship with it as
yeah,
opposed to just canceling it altogether, right? So whereas for me, as you know from the interview I did with your show, it was like I tried numerous different things to try and get to
yeah,
that stage, and it just simply didn't work. So at that point I had to do throw the hat in, so to speak, and go, okay, well, this
yeah,
is simply cannot be a part of my life. So,
yeah,
and that's, yeah, absolutely. There's, it's different for different people. So, kudos to you for being able to do that and cultivate a life that you don't, have the need to have like a substance to for whatever reason. Right. And,
yeah.
yeah, a little bit about like, was there some of the experimentation with the drugs
Mm.
and so forth? Safe to say those were just kind of in the same umbrella as like you have this responsibility now, and those just sort of went by the wayside as well, or what was it like for you to get out of you using drugs as well?
I found that if I'm not drinking,
Mm.
there's zero desire to do anything else. To be honest, it's
Oh,
only when I had excess amount of alcohol that
okay.
would sort of then get me to
To what else?
want to desire something else. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
But
I get you.
yeah, that was the thing. I've got zero like desire to have. Look, I still look. I love a glass of wine, and I look forward to that on the weekends most of the time. But I mean, it's not anything else is not. It doesn't register, anymore.
Yeah.
So like, I don't have that desire to want to have some sort of substance, because unless obviously if I'm in a situation where I've started to drink excessively, that's a different story. And then, then I'm around it, then that can be a massive issue. So yeah,
Sure, sure. But
yeah,
you have that self-awareness now, and
correct.
you
Yeah,
know you're
yeah,
very
yeah.
cognizant of what's on the line. You got the young family,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah,
right.
for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah, no, interesting story, and and I love that because you're the first person that's come on this show that's been able to say, "Hey, I do have this relationship with it now. I've changed it, and I can still
yeah,
have a couple drinks on the weekend, and it's not all encompassing." So
Yeah.
for me, like, hats off to you, man, for being able to do
Yeah.
that. That's great. It's and for anybody that might be triggering too, I mean, apologies, but we're talking about you
Yeah.
here, right? And just giving all the different perspectives and nuances of different people's, lives and personal development. So yeah, that's cool, dude. I love how you're sharing that. Speaking of like other people's, lives and such, you're spending a lot of time helping others,
Mm.
figure out what their purpose is. And I very much, I'm looking at, with a lot of coaches, myself included, and by the sounds of it, you as well, having that hero's journey. It's like you've done all this undertaking of
Mm.
yourself and gone into these deep, dark areas of your own soul and well being, and come out the other side with all these, with all this. Like this new version of yourself, and now you want to share that. You have the blueprint,
Yeah.
what worked for you, and you want to go back and share that with other people. So that's kind of like the
Yeah.
third stage of the hero's journey that you're on now. So what does that look like for you? You mentioned a program here. Like,
Yeah.
how is that, when somebody comes to you and goes, hey, like, I have this feeling, I have this intuition, I just have no clue how to bring that out of me. And then, that's one thing, is to
Mm.
identify that, but then to be able to integrate that and actually like
Mm.
actualize that, that's a whole nother thing altogether. So can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit about the program?
Yeah. So look, I think for the most part, I mean, the outcomes that people that I work with, what they want really is, one, they want control of their life. So what I mean by that is, too often we feel like, we're the passenger in the vehicle of life, like we're sitting down and we don't have any control where we're going. So it's about, being in the driver's seat and actually controlling what it is that you want to do day to day. It's about your lifestyle as well and how you want that to look. And then it's about having a sense of purpose. So it's control, lifestyle, and purpose. And I think, if people can achieve those three things, and this is why I was able to change my relationship with alcohol and drugs, is because I think once that's connected, you're connected to those things. For me, it just opens your eyes to other possibilities, other opportunities, and you begin to move life in the direction that you want it to move. But generally, what happens with the guys that I deal with and the girls that I deal with is that, we start off assessing their life. So generally there's a problem in one or two areas specifically. And I don't like to focus on more than sort of one or two areas at a time, because, if you've got a magnifying glass, okay, if you, and we've all done this, you go outside, you can actually focus the light on one particular area and you can see the force that it has, it actually,
Mm-hmm.
you can actually burn a hole through a piece of paper if you do that.
Right.
And our focus is the same. And so it's about identifying, okay, where are the areas that are we're the most vulnerable at the moment, okay, and addressing those areas, and how do we want those areas to look, okay. Then it's about understanding where the potential is to actually grow here, okay. How can we actually, extract this information and, put something in place so that we can actually, move from where we are to where we want to be. And then from there, obviously, we can make a purpose through understanding, what we're connected to at a deep level as well. So, anything we do every day, if we can relate it to something that's deep and meaningful to us, then we're more likely to follow through, and we're more likely to continue down that path of change and that path of actually doing that thing that's actually going to light us up. And so once we've identified these things, we can test and measure them. We can make tweaks. It's important that we understand what we're doing each day, and if something's not working, then we can change that, and we can actually, move in the direction that we'd much rather be going in. So that's generally it. And then there's different components to this that I speak about, and the first one is belief, and that is to question everything that you think is true. Just because you believe something, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Mm.
It's basic programming. And when you understand what a belief is, you'll understand that more often than not, that was formed from when you were born to pretty much the age of 7 is where most of your beliefs are formed. And then you're just sort of repeating the same stories over and over again. So although stuff that you might have heard back when you were a child from your parents, from the TV or the radio, might have been well intended, doesn't necessarily mean it was good information for you to take on at the time. And although it may have served you at the time, then perhaps these days it's not, a good thing to actually buy into that anymore. Okay. So, beliefs the first thing we address. Then it's your identity as well, and the way you paint yourself. And I think, again, and the two go hand in hand. It really is the story about what you tell yourself you're about, okay, what you're capable of. You get an idea in your head. I want this, or I've got this idea. And within a second, you talk yourself out of it because, you go, well, people like me can't do that. Okay. I can't do that. I don't have the ability to do that. So it's about then really looking at someone who you want to role model and emulating that person. Okay. And taking action steps into becoming that person that you want to become. The other thing is proximity and getting around the right people. It's so important to get yourself around groups of people who are on the same page, who you can feed off, who are vibrating, with the same frequency, who have that same ambition or spark within them to, want to pursue something else. And, we spoke about this on our podcast with the alcohol situation. And, there are certain people I don't hang around anymore. Okay. So it's not as simple as me just changing my relationship with alcohol itself, but I know I have to remove myself from certain groups, which I've done as well, because if I don't do that, I'm human. So if I'm in an environment, I'm still going to get triggered. So I understand that about myself as well. So proximity is massive. Having some form of discipline too, and developing that is also important. So doing things when you don't feel like doing them necessarily. And, the good thing about discipline is that it's a muscle and we can develop it, we can build it, and we start off small. There's a process that I take people through on how to build discipline. And, if you go to the gym for the first time, Matt, you're not going to bench press 200 pounds, so there's a process to it. Okay. And it's baby steps, but, if compounded over time, you can build that muscle and it becomes a servant to you. And even when you don't feel like doing something, you get up and you do it anyway, which is important. I'll talk about formulating a plan as well and having some sort of detailed plan as to what your perfect day would want to look like. And then we just build the habits around that. So we have a series of habits that we implement. We remove some that aren't serving us anymore. And so from those things, we're generally able to build a life in the direction that we want to go.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. So yeah, I'm just looking at it's like belief, identity, proximity, discipline. Yeah. The consistency is such a big thing, and it's worth mentioning again to circle back to just the whole baby steps and like we were talking about atomic habits and all that. And you mentioned the compound interest. So I always think of it like that. I think there's even a graph, correct me if I'm wrong, in the book where it mentions, like, think of it with the way that you're investing in yourself. And if it is just that, like, 10 minutes or that small amount of the small micro habits, eventually over a long enough timeline, it isn't just like, like it's not going to just go like for the listeners. I'm just going like basically straight across. There will be a stage where all of a sudden it has that, like, I forget what they call it, the hockey stick. Where all of a sudden it really spikes up. And so, if you keep at with something like you've mentioned in your bio over the last 6 years, you've done that like 10,000 hours, which is the whole 10,000 hours of mastery, right?
Yeah.
And that is just logging time. It's consistency. It's the discipline, right? And they're I love all these, these words and how the values essentially, and how they really coexist together too, because with the discipline and putting yourself in proximity with somebody, even if you don't necessarily have that self-belief, or there is a self-belief, but it's mixed or shrouded in self-doubt, eventually, over a long enough timeline, you will start getting that self-belief. You're going to have evidence pointing to yourself being able to do that. And then your identity is going to change. So they all seem like they just sort of swim in the same waters, and you know what I mean? And they kind of can really coexist very well amongst each other. So I love the sounds of your program there. As we kind of wind things down here, I do have a couple final questions for you, but basically I want to, if anybody wants to reach out to you, Simon, if what you're saying here sounds really, intriguing to a listener, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
The easiest way is, like, part of this podcast, I'm doing a discovery call. So if people just want to have a chat, that'll be a free call. Okay. And it's only like a 15 or 20-minute call. Now, I might not be a good fit for your listeners. Okay. Like I said, I do one-to-one programs. So if during that conversation, we'll work out obviously where the person's at, and I guess what the problems are, and we'll go from there. Pretty much. I mean,
Yeah,
each case is different, but more than happy to do that and have a chat. And I'll send you the link, Matt, so you've got that. You can
brilliant.
put in your notes,
That's
okay?
great.
And if it's not me, then I'm happy to guide you in the right direction to the right person. But yeah, there's no obligation to do anything, obviously. But yeah, it's a free chat, and we'll just see how you're going and where you're at the moment.
Yeah, that's great. You know, those calls are really great, like the discovery calls, and just having a like soundboard of somebody else that can reflect back to you. Me, like say if I were to call you, like you reflect back to me what I'm saying, and then there's a curiosity. Okay, what you're saying when I'm here is,
Yeah,
can you summarize that? And you're like, oh, shoot, I didn't even really know I was verbalizing it like that. So, and you know what, like the show, being Beyond Recovery, there is going to be some folks that are in that stage where they're out of that early stages of sobriety, and they're looking for, okay, what are going to be these components of my life, my new life that I'm looking to pursue. And it sounds like you're the perfect, a perfect resource as far as that goes, is, really focusing on, okay, yeah, creating this new identity, essentially this beyond
yeah.
recovery identity. So yeah, really cool stuff. I have one question for you. I've been posing with a lot of my guests, and I'm curious to see what you think about it, or what your answer is rather. Yeah. So authenticity, the word
Mm.
authentic and say your truth. It's one of these words that does get thrown out there a lot, a fair bit, right? And I'm always curious because people so far have had fairly varying, or yeah, the different varieties of answers. What is authentic, or being your authentic self? What does that mean to you?
Being your authentic self means to me to be honest, to have integrity, and to act as if no one was watching you all the time.
Mm,
So what I mean by that is the biggest. I'll rephrase that. So the
yeah.
biggest indicator of authenticity is if you're doing the right thing even when no one's watching. All right.
Mm.
So pretty much having that self accountability and being your real self and letting go of what other people are going to think about you, and not just putting stuff out there because you think that's what people actually want to see. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, being real really is just embracing your quirkiness, and
Yeah.
your unique traits that make yourself you. And I think it's easier said than done. I understand that, because obviously, and I'm at the beginning of a new journey myself, going down this road, and it can be very daunting because we all have these fears of judgment. We all have these, and they're misconceptions that people actually care more about us than what they really do, to be honest. So
Yeah. Yeah.
my coach often says
Yeah.
that to me. She'll say,
Yeah.
it's not all about you, Simon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
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 But I
Fair.
think, yeah, being authentic is about just embracing your quirkiness and your own unique traits that other people might laugh at, but it's why people love you, I reckon. And
Mm.
so it's
Hmm.
about putting them on show and serving your tribe. We've all got
Mm.
our own tribe. We're all going to have people that resonate, well, we resonate with. And so it's just continuing to be yourself and to put out real information about what you're all about.
Yeah, really cool. I like that a lot. Yeah, excellent, excellent. Okay, we know where to find you. I'll definitely have you back on, man. I really enjoy our conversations. So all the best to you. You got a great show. Everybody will have Simon's links and such in the show
Yeah,
notes. Dude, thank you so much for coming on today.
no problem. Thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
You betcha.